Every single one of us has a phone in our pocket, but we don't play games primarily on our phones. Why is that? And why is this about to change? Because I'm predicting in the next few years, our phones will become our primary gaming devices. Before you click off and leave a comment saying how crazy it is, I know it sounds nuts, but hear me out. Because it actually makes a lot of sense, and it's not for the reasons you might think, because some billion-dollar companies are betting on phones becoming our primary way to play games. In the early 2010s, many people were predicting that phones would take over gaming forever. I was super excited and on board with this prediction because naturally, being able to do everything on one device is just straight up cool and convenient. And while yes, phones did have a big impact, there was a huge problem with this prediction. And not only did they predict that phones would take over gaming, they predicted that phones would take over everything. They thought that phones were going to become our all-in-one devices, our gaming laptops, our desktops, our full-blown computers, whatever you can imagine, our phones were going to do it all. So what exactly happened? Because while yes, today phones are our primary devices, they haven't replaced everything. So watch to the end because me personally, I'm trying to solve what I think is the single biggest problem holding back phones from becoming our main gaming devices. Well, to understand why this prediction went wrong and why it's different now, we need to understand on a very basic level how phones work. Now just stay with me for a second because I promise it's really simple. Our phones are literally just small computers in our pockets, no different from our big desktop computers. So you're probably thinking, okay, well, if that's true, why can't we just game on them already? Well, that stems from a little difference in our phones called architecture. Not that kind of architecture, we're talking about computer architecture. All that means is that essentially when apps run on our phones, the apps themselves or software are speaking to the phone itself, the hardware. So the software is speaking to the hardware. Simple. Same thing on a desktop computer. When you run a program, the program itself is speaking to the computer. The software is speaking to the hardware, telling it what to do. Our phones and computers do this almost the exact same way. The only difference is they speak different languages. So what's the problem? Well, our phones speak one language and our computers speak another. These languages are what we call architecture. Our phones speak a language called ARM, and our computers speak a language called x86. For years, this has caused a lot of difficulties for us to run phone apps on our computers and computer programs on our phones. Now, mind you, this is a very simplified explanation, but it's important in understanding why phones and how phones could take over mobile gaming, and not just mobile gaming, but future gaming in general. Because spoiler alert, computer architecture or languages can be translated just like real languages. We call this emulation. So now that you understand how our phones and computers work, now you can understand why phones have failed to take over in the past and why it's different now. What has happened recently that it has changed the market so much that we could see phones become our main gaming devices? Well, there is one big thing, one driving force, something that is, in my opinion, unstoppable. But I'm gonna get to that one at the end because there's a bunch of other really important reasons that are not very well known, but I think are just as important. The first is sheer raw power. What do I mean by that? Well, it's believed by many that our phones are simply not powerful enough to run most games, especially modern AAA games. But let me explain why this isn't really true. It's just a big common myth that our phones can't handle modern games. I mean, sure, modern gaming rigs are these big fancy computers with water cooling, dedicated CPUs and GPUs, and our phones are just these tiny little devices. So how can it just be a myth? Well, these big modern machines are mostly just expensive fluff. The modern handhelds that have come out recently have proven that. Now don't get me wrong, I'm a PC enthusiast, I love big desktop gaming rigs, but for most people, they're overkill. Modern gaming doesn't require big, expensive rigs. Now in the past, the reason our phones couldn't play modern games is because this myth that they can't play them was actually true. Our phones were underpowered back then. And the fact that they were underpowered is actually the reason they've improved so quickly. Every year, phones would basically double in performance. So what changed now? Well, phones aren't underpowered anymore. They have the chops to play modern games, and I can prove it. Before you comment down below, there's no possible way our phones could run something like Cyberpunk 2077 or Battlefield 6. Consider what I'm about to say because it might change your perspective. Like I mentioned before, our phones speak the language of ARM, while our computers speak the language of x86. Surprisingly, Apple was one of the first companies with a major innovation to switch all their computers from x86 over to ARM. And fun fact, now their computers and phones are fully based on ARM. No more x86 in sight. This switch happened almost 6 years ago in 2020. Wow, it's weird to say that 2020 was 6 years ago. Back then, Apple created their new chip they call the M1. Now, what's crazy about this chip is that Apple shook up the whole industry. They took a huge risk switching over to ARM, but they did it for a very important reason. Do you know what that is? Power efficiency. Apple switched their whole line of computers from the base MacBook Air all the way to the Mac Pro solely because of efficiency. Now, some problems did start to arise. Many programs designed for x86 would now have issues running on ARM computers. So what was the solution? Well, Apple created a translation layer that allowed x86 programs to run on ARM. Now, I'm not going to get into the weeds of how this actually works, but what's important to note is that this was the first step into how Apple is showing the whole industry how the future, and not just the future, but the future of gaming lies in ARM. And if the future of gaming lies in ARM, the future of gaming could lie in our phones. And Apple not only proved that the switch could be done, they proved that the new ARM chips could be just as capable, if not more so, than the older x86 chips. So now you're probably thinking, okay, well, what does this have to do with phones? Well, this giant step that Apple took away from x86 chips and towards more efficient ARM chips also applies to phones and games. All of the seriously demanding heavy programs and games that ran on old Apple computers run great on the newer computers, despite switching from x86 to ARM. There are even full-blown Mac programs like Final Cut Pro and Logic Pro running on iPads now. Traditionally, to run these programs, you needed computers that costed thousands of dollars. Now, if you think Apple is unique here, you'd be wrong, because get this. As soon as Apple made the switch, other large companies started to follow. And this next company, I think, holds the keys for phones becoming the future of gaming. Qualcomm is the company that makes most of the modern chips for modern Android phones. There are other companies, but Qualcomm is the main one and the biggest one. And they make indisputably the most powerful ARM chips. But some might say, well, if that's true, why aren't they in everything? Well, that's actually starting to change, specifically in the laptop and virtual reality gaming space. Well, why these two spaces? It's actually a lot more obvious than you think. What's the most important aspect that makes a laptop and a VR headset portable? Battery life. And because these ARM chips are super efficient, they're great on battery life. And you know what's wild? Qualcomm started making chips specifically for laptops, and on their first try, they were able to outperform older x86 chips. They killed older x86 laptops from AMD and Intel on battery life and efficiency. And battery life doesn't only matter for laptops, it matters for gaming too. I mean, think about it. If you have a console that you want to take anywhere with you, it's got to have good battery life. It's actually why the Nintendo Switch and Switch 2 are both based on ARM. And even the older consoles like the 3DS and DS were also based on ARM. Even all the latest VR headsets from Meta, like the Quest 3 and Quest Pro, have Qualcomm ARM chips inside them. So we have Apple and Qualcomm leading ARM chip development, and we even have NVIDIA making ARM chips, which is what the Switch and Switch 2 uses. But the major problem we still have is that modern AAA games are still mostly being made for x86 chips. The PS5 and most PCs still use x86 after all. And to make the problem worse, most older games run on x86. So how does a problem that deep get solved? Well, stay with me because the solution has literally just appeared out of nowhere. If any of you have ever played PC games or heard of PC games, you've probably heard of a little program called Steam. Steam is the biggest platform on PCs for buying games. And there's a good reason their reputation is so good. Their platform is feature-rich, easy to use, and frequently has amazing sales on games. Steam's entire brand identity has basically been built from having good sales. And Valve, the company that owns Steam, doesn't just have Steam. They have other software, games, and hardware. You may have heard of some of their more popular games like Half-Life, Portal, or Counter-Strike. But Valve is notoriously a mysterious company. Unlike other big companies like Apple or Qualcomm, Valve is actually a private company. And what this means is that Valve doesn't have to publicly disclose their financial information or please greedy shareholders. This fundamentally defines how Valve operates because it means that Valve is willing to take risks others aren't willing to take. And Valve is willing to make decisions that are conventionally unwise. Now, have these decisions paid off for them? I'd say they have. Some of them started off rocky and got better with time, but some decisions they've made have reshaped the entire industry, and this one came out of nowhere. You may have heard of the Steam Deck, Valve's handheld. It changed the handheld industry completely, making everyone realize that a handheld PC could be an amazing way to play games. Now, the recent innovations Valve have been working on are going to bleed out into the smartphone market. This may sound crazy, but Valve is actually at the forefront of making phones the #1 gaming platform. And how did they do that? Simple. By developing in areas no one else would. Valve literally just announced a few days ago the Steam Frame. It's a VR headset that can stream games from your computer or run games on itself. But what's so relevant here is that this headset uses a Qualcomm chip made for phones 2 years ago. And not only is this chip 2 years old, Valve is developing a translation layer that would let PC games, x86 games, run perfectly on the headset itself, ARM hardware. This breakthrough could be exactly what we need for phones to break out as our main gaming machines. Okay, great, so now phones will be our main gaming machines and now everyone will only game on their phones, right? Well, not exactly. There's still 2 major problems that phones need to solve, although the community has actually taken up a mantle on these difficult problems. The first one is backwards compatibility with old games. This problem is one I'm personally very invested in because I love playing older games on my phone. And fortunately for us, the community has actually invested so much of their own talent into fixing this problem for us. And how did they do that? By making emulators. Real quick, if you don't know what an emulator is, it's basically a program or app that lets you play games from all kinds of different consoles. For example, you can download an emulator on Android called Melon DS and play DS games. Or you can download an emulator called Eden and play Nintendo Switch games. The possibilities are endless. And companies didn't make these programs, the community did. In fact, most of these emulators are free and open source, meaning you can go look at the code yourself. And the reason I find this so cool is because these communities are driven not by profit, fame, or greed, but by pure passion, pure love for the games. And these emulators are preserving older games for the future generation. These apps are instrumental for putting phones at the forefront of gaming in general. Even without all the power that our newer phones have, our older phones can still play decades worth of amazing games. So that leaves us with just one last big problem. I've talked about this problem on my channel before, and it's what I believe to be the biggest problem holding back our phones from becoming the ultimate gaming machines. That is the controls. Before you say anything, just know that controls can make or break a console. I'm sure you've noticed how bad touchscreen controls are for games that were designed to use a controller. Touchscreen controls are fine when the games were designed with a touchscreen in mind, but when the games were designed with a controller in mind, touchscreen controls don't work. Now you might think, oh, easy solution, just use a Bluetooth controller. Well, that doesn't always work because you don't always want to take around a big bulky controller. Sometimes you just want to have the controller there when you need it in the moment. That's why me personally, I'm not really a fan of those big bulky telescopic controllers like the GameSir or the Backbone. They're great controllers, just not for me because they're not really that portable. So what's the solution? I think it's having a controller that's attached to your phone at all times. A controller that's super flat and can slide out when you need it and hidden when you don't. If that sounds too good to be true, get ready because I've spent months working on this controller and I'm launching my store very soon. If you go to this link, you can sign up for the email list and get notified when the store goes live. Fortunately though, I'm not the only one working on a solution like this. Josh King partnered with OSnap and created this awesome controller called the MCON. This absolute unit of a controller is an interesting take on portable controllers too. If you're still not convinced that phones are the future of gaming, Here are some crazy statistics from Statista about how mobile gaming is taking over and growing year over year by billions of dollars. And not only are phones taking over the whole industry, I think that the effects are starting to bleed over into other industries. For example, have you noticed how game quality has dropped across the board? Sure, there have been some great games recently, but there's also been a ton of flops. And the thing that's odd to me is that not only has the quality of games been going down from these big companies, but they've also been making less games. I mean, just take a look at the PS5 exclusive list and the Switch 2 exclusive list. It's staggeringly small. These lists are hardly giving a reason to upgrade to the consoles to begin with. Now, don't get me wrong, there are great reasons to upgrade to those consoles. But I just think it's sad how less and less games have been made. But the important thing is that phones can actually play older games and open us up to a catalog of amazing games from decades and decades of time. Our phones have now basically allowed us to play games that before we didn't have access to. So even though in the modern gaming industry, games are getting worse and they're making less games, there's still plenty of awesome indie games we can play on our phones and plenty of awesome older games we can also play on our phones. Now, here's my vision for what something like the future of gaming would be. You pick up your phone, use it like normal. Then, if you're on the couch, a bench, or a car, you can just slide out the controls and play whatever you want. When the controls slide out, a launcher opens showing you your plethora of games. Old games, new games, multiplayer, single player, and the UI would be something similar to a PSP or a 3DS. Then when you're done, you can just slide away the controls and continue to use your phone as normal. One awesome feature would be that when you slide out the controls, it opens the game right where you left off. And when you close it, saves where you were. And when you get home, if you want to play on your TV, you can just plug your phone into a dock and play it just like a home console. Or alternatively, you can hook it up to a dock for a monitor and use it with a mouse and keyboard just like a computer. As you can see, the options are really endless. Our phones are certainly powerful enough and we have the technology and the means to make them, which makes me believe it's only a matter of time. Thanks for watching.